Fuck you. Hello and welcome to tutorial 10 for GDTK stats. In this tutorial we're going to be covering spells and targeting. As always, we've copied over the previously completed tutorial into a new scene. This time I've made a few changes for you as well. Nothing setup related, but let's go ahead and see what we've done. So first of all, we've got these practice dummies that are already prefabbed for you, and they do have stats and damage receivers. Because we've covered those already. However, there is something else that we're going to be adding to them. We've also added this fireball particle effect, which we're going to be turning into a projectile. I've added a layer for the mana stat and just set up the basic UI for spells, but again, those haven't been wired up. Let's go ahead and jump in. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to open up each of these practice dummies, and we're going to select the damage receivers, and we're going to add a lock-on target. Now, a lock-on target is just something that tells the system how to lock on for targeted events. We can optionally create indicators over them, and that's what this indicator offset is for. It tells us where to move that. We're going to leave it at 0, 0, 0. Now, to go along with that lock on, we're going to go to our player, and under spells, we're going to see this max targets. We're going to set that to 3. For our case, we want to be able to target up to 3. This could be whatever you need for your game. It can even change dynamically. Next, we're going to add a component, and this is going to be the targeting system. This is going to tell us how to target items. We're only going to target things that are on the default layer, and we can lock onto them within 5 units of ourselves. If we selected auto lock on as soon as we entered range, it would automatically lock onto them. We're going to leave that blank for now. Otherwise, because we're not automatically locking in, this is the button that will cause us to lock on to anything that's available within range. And let's go ahead and assign our indicators as well. I don't know if that didn't come up in the search window, but that's okay. So this is the locked on arrow and the optional arrow. And I can go ahead and drag these into the scene for you real quick. You can see here, it's just a green arrow for option and a red arrow if we're locked on. I have them set over the dummy right now, but they will reset their location based on what we set the offset to be. Okay, so now we have targets to lock onto and the ability to lock onto them. Let's make a projectile. So this projectile is going to be a dummy. It's not going to be guided, it's just going to go forward. And we've got our particle effect, which I've shown. We've got a rigid body and a sphere collider so that we know when we hit something. And we're going to go ahead and add a projectile damage source 3D. The layer mask tells us what we can hit. The speed is how fast it moves along its forward axis. Units per second. We're going to move this down to 0.25. Lifespan is how many seconds this will live if it does not hit anything. Put that down to 5 seconds. Max hits is how many objects it's allowed to hit before it destroys itself. We're going to leave that at 1. We're going to find the stat source in the registry like we've done with everything else. It's going to be player. We're going to add a damage type of fire and a normal amount of 10. And that's all we need to get this started. So let's go ahead and drag that into our resources and then prefabs directory. Remember, all of these things need to be under a resources folder to work properly. With that set up, we no longer need it in our scene, so we're going to go ahead and delete it. Now let's look at some of these canvas changes in a little more detail. I put the stats in a vertical layout group because we have one stat that isn't always going to be there. Mana only shows up after you've taken a class or a level in Magician class. Now, we could leave this always there and have it just always set to full, which 0 of 0, right? But let's hide it when it's not around. So trigger by stat expression. Again, we're going to find it in the registry with player. And the expression is going to be mana, oops, hit the caps lock there, mana max greater than 0. So do we have mana? On a match, meaning mana is greater than 0, we're going to set this game object to active. And if it does not match, which means our mana maximum is 0, we're going to set it to inactive. So it'll automatically hide itself, and that's why I put it into the vertical layout group, so that experience will move up. And let's go ahead and make sure that we've assigned, we have not. Let's give it a icon. Okay, so with that set, let's move on to the next portion of the UI, the spell list UI. Now there's a couple of ways to handle displaying spells, and we're going to go through both of them. So the spell list UI, we're going to add a spell list UI to it. Again, we're going to find that reference of player. It's going to be its own content, and it's going to need a spell UI prefab. So let's go ahead and create a new panel. And this will be spell item UI. We'll do 72 by 72. Again, no background. I thought I had already had this one set up for us, but I guess not. So we'll just do this one real quick, and the rest, as you can see, already are. In fact, let's go ahead and copy that. This will be faster. So we'll go up here to our manual spells, and we're just going to copy this guy over. We'll rename him to spell item UI. There's a couple of other changes that we could need to make as well. So under key binding, we're going to change this color back to white. And we're going to set the text to 1. Make it a little bigger for this one. Oops, that was a lot bigger on accident. And we're going to add the spell UI up to the top. So we're not going to allow this to be dragged. We're not going to allow anything to be dropped into here. If you selected cast by click and you clicked on this, it would automatically cast whatever spell is assigned to it. We're going to do cast by key index. So as each one of these are added to the list, they will automatically be assigned a number starting at 1. And it automatically knows how to bind that to a keyboard with an alpha 1 through 9 or a keypad 1 through 9. So up to 9 spells it can automatically do. Beyond that, you're going to have to start getting into manual. So key binding is the label. We're going to put that right there into the index label slot. We're going to add the spell sprite to the image. And this also keeps track of whether or not you can currently cast your spell. It gets updated automatically as items change. So what we're going to do for that is when we can cast the spell, we're going to move this, this layer right here, and we're going to set that game object to inactive. And when you cannot cast it, we're going to activate it. And that's going to look like this. We're just going to sort of darken it out so that the player knows that they can't use it. Okay, with that, we can drag this into our prefabs folder, delete it from our scene, and then assign the prefab. So now this will automatically start filling out as we go. For these three, we're going to select them and do spell UI as well. We will do the same thing with the uncastable. So I think, no, I can't edit all three at once. That's fine. Let's do a quick pause in this so I can set the three of these up without you sitting to watch it, and we'll be right back. All right, now we've got those all set up exactly the same way as we did the other one. And we're going to add in one more item here. We're going to do trigger by button, and this is going to be on button down. Actually, I'm sorry, that is my mistake. It is not trigger by button. We'll remove that component. It is trigger by key, and we will trigger on key down. So the first one, we will be using F1, and when that triggers, we will select that top level object, and we will say spell UI dot cast. The second one will be F2. And the third one will be F3. So why are we doing this? This one is how we're going to do manual spell slots. So we've already seen how to automatically do spell slots. This is going to be ones where either you have more than 10 or you want the user to be able to drag and drop a spell into the slot. So the last thing we're going to do is we're actually going to no, we're going to leave this. This is not going to be drag and droppable, and we'll find out why in just a moment. We're actually going to go now to this button, and on click, it's going to show this manual spell selection. And that looks like this. So we've got a list of available spells, which is going to be the same thing as down here, and then spell slots, which we're going to bind these slots to these slots. So the first thing we need to do is we need to go to the spell list UI and add a spell list UI. Again, we will find the player. It's going to be its own content. And we're going to take that first spell item UI that we had done. We're going to unpack the prefab, because this one we're going to do allow drag on. Okay, so this will be spell item UI draggable. We'll make that into a prefab. Delete it from our scene. And assign it to the spell list. So now the things that show up here will be draggable. Actually, let's go back into that prefab real quick. And we're going to remove these events because we're not going to gray them out if it's not castable. We can delete that item. We can also delete key binding because we don't want to cast from the selection screen. So we'll remove the cast by key index as well. So the only thing this will do is show us our icon and allow us to drag it. And now let's switch into scene view real quick to make sure I have the right item selected. I do not. Okay, down here in manual spell selection binding, we will see these binding slots. And for all three of them, we're going to add a spell UI, and we're going to assign a mirror to. So first things first, for each one of these, we will set the image, and we will allow drop so that you can drop items to it. And you can see once you do the allow drop, a mirror to becomes available. So slot 3 binding will mirror to spell slot 3. And then spell slot 2 will be bound. And finally, spell slot 1. Now the last thing we need to do is hook up the close button and tell it to disable this object when we click it. So we'll be able to click a button here, window pops up, drag our items into our spell slots, click the button, and close it back. I believe that takes care of all of our UI. So now it's time to jump into the fun part of creating spells. Let's go to our stats database. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to schools of magic. This is absolutely not required, but it can be useful in a lot of games. This is just telling us what type of spell it is. It gives us a little more information. So we'll do abjuration as one. And evocation as the other. I don't have icons created for these, but that's okay. We're not actually displaying them anywhere at the moment. So now we're finally on to spells themselves. We're going to create new, and this is going to be a heal spell. And the allowed classes are going to be magician. So you have to have a magician class in order to gain this spell. And we'll go into spell attack. Spells can have multiple attacks and different casting levels. Most games are only going to have one, and you're not really going to care what the level is. Certain role-playing games, you might want to be able to cast it at different levels and have different things happen to it. For these, they're all going to be a single level item. Casting requirements are, of course, what we need for this to cast. So the heal spell is going to be nice and easy. We only need a mana. We need to have at least 5 mana. So we're going to say mana is greater than or equal to 5. But we don't want our player to waste their mana trying to heal if their health is already at full. So we're going to say and, or 2 ampersands, which is the coding language for and. Health is less than health max. So now you will only cast it if your health is below full and you have enough mana. Now the casting modifiers are applied to the caster as soon as the spell starts. So in this case, and in fact for all of the spells, we want to remove the mana that we've just used. So we will affect mana, and we will subtract 5. Under targeting, we're going to select self. We're going to say that this is indeed healing. We're going to automatically hit. We're never going to do critical healing. In this case, damage is the heal amount. So we don't need to apply a damage type, but we are going to set an amount. And sorry, just checking my notes here. We're going to heal for 5. Precast and postcast are action sequences that we will be using in the next 2 spells. So, let's create our first action sequence. This is going to be for our fireball spell. So we're going to call it cast fireball. And this is going to help us do a few things. I want to have the character do an animation prior to casting the spell. And then, of course, I want to create that fireball that we just made. So first we're going to select animator modifier. We're going to use remote target, which will be supplied by the system. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to target attack ID. And that's an integer. Sorry, just need to check my notes again. Okay, so attack ID is 3. And then we're going to trigger it. So we're going to use remote again. We're going to this time target attack, and we're going to trigger it. Now we want to wait for a certain point in our animation before we spawn the fireball. So we're going to hit wait, and we're going to wait for 0.6 seconds. And then finally, we're going to go down to spawn prefab. And the prefab we're going to spawn is Fireball. And this spawns in the location of your target, and its initial rotation is also the same. Sorry, its initial local rotation. So we're going to offset this a little bit. We want to bring it up slightly off the ground, so we're going to set it to 0.064. And we want it a little forward, so it's going to be 0.1. Remember, these are relative. You don't have to worry about where your character is facing in the world. This will be the correct amount. We'll use rotation so that at the end it's rotated in the same direction. And we won't parent it so that it comes out of the prefab. So what we actually do, technically, if anyone is interested, is it is first parented when it is created. And if you do not select parent, it then clears the parent out. So this is all we need to be able to cast the fireball. So we'll go over to spells. We'll create a new spell called Fireball. Pardon me. And we have a sprite for this. I actually have one for heal as well. I forgot to add it. We'll go back and do that in a moment. We're going to say you have to be magician. We're going to make this an evocation spell. And the casting requirements on this one are going to be mana greater than or equal to 25. And again, we're going to remove the mana once we've used it. And we're going to leave targeting as manual. The system doesn't need to know how to target things because it's going to be a damage dealer that gets spawned. So the only thing it needs is precast. Now we've got a fireball spell ready to go. Let's create an action sequence for one more. This is going to be our final spell, and this is going to be Cast Barrage. Actually, let's do it the easy way. Let's delete that one, select Cast Fireball, and duplicate the entry, because almost everything is going to be the same here. So we'll cast Barrage, and the attack ID is going to be 4. And instead of spawning a fireball, we're going to spawn on targets. So what this is going to do is it's going to go through the list of targets inside of your stats and spawn one on each of them. And we're going to use this new particle effect that I created. And that's all it is. It's just a particle effect. It does nothing else. We're going to leave the offset, and we're going to go ahead and parent it. Okay. So small glitch here, I will make sure to get this done before release, is that cloning those did not separate them. So I'm just going to reload this scene. And they should now be separated. There we go. Now the attack IDs are different. Again, I will get that fixed prior to release. So now we have that action sequence ready. Let's do, we'll call this Fire Barrage. And this is going to be a magician. It's going to be the School of Evocation. And this one's casting requirement is going to be mana greater than or equal to 35, which will automatically remove when we cast it. This targeting is going to be the target list. The maximum number of targets this can hit is going to be 3. And this little interesting bit right here is called Force Max. So if you have one target, but a maximum of 3 targets, it will hit that same target 3 times if you have this selected. Otherwise, it would only hit it once. We're going to go ahead and Force Max. And then For hit type, it's going to be automatic. Damage type is going to be fire. And just checking my notes. Okay, so 20 damage. So the precast is going to be cast barrage, so it'll go through the animation, it will spawn those particle effects, and after that happens, it's going to do this. It will do this part right here. We could have something happen after that as well, which is what this post-cast sequence is for, but we're not going to use it on this one. So now that we have our spells, we need to be able to get them. So let's go into our classes. Let's select Magician. We're going to add a trait. This is going to be level 1 spell. And this is going to unlock at, well, this will unlock immediately because we're going to unlock at first level. So we'll add spells, all enlist, and heal. Then we're going to add another trait, level 2 spells. This will unlock at character level, or sorry, at class level 2. So once we reach the second level of Magician, could be our 4th level of character, could be our 2nd level, but it has to be Magician level 2. We will add our remaining 2 spells of Fireball, Fire Barrage. We're going to hit save, and that should hopefully do it. Let's go ahead and press play, and hope I haven't forgotten anything. Alright, so here we are. We don't have our mana because we don't have a class in it yet. We're going to go ahead and run in here to gain some experience. We'll level up. And we've set it to not being able to take Magician at level 1, that's right. So now we'll take a level Magician, and now we can see that we've got mana here. We'll enable mana regen as one of our rewards. And you can see we've got 1 spell available. We'll do a 2nd level Magician, and now we have 3. Now this one is blank. Why? Because we didn't put the icon in it. That's okay. We can see it's darkened up, and that's because we didn't take any damage. So now that we've taken damage, let's hit the 1 key. There we go. Wait for the burn to go away. Full health. Now let's go over here and stand in front of one of our dummies. You can see that it's got the arrow going up to indicate that it is a potential lock. We'll hit the, let's try and get a good camera angle on this, hit the 2 key. There we go. We missed, but you can see it firing off. There we go. Now we've hit it. So it's a little harder to target with these things, especially in 3rd person. Now you can see the Fire Barrage is currently grayed out. Why? We have no targets. If I right click and lock onto the target, you can see now we have Fire Barrage. So now I'm going to hit the 3 key. Big amount of damage, particle effects, very good. Let's go over to our player real quick and turn auto lock on. So as soon as we walk in, there we go. Now we've got them selected. Let's hit 3. And we've hit all 3 targets. So the last remaining thing is to make sure that the manual selection works. So let's click the Show Spell Selection UI button. And we can see we've got 3 spells available. And we're going to put them in a different order. So press close here. I didn't hook up close correctly. That's okay. I bet I can still hit F1. There we go. Alright, let's go take care of those last small little fiddly bits. We'll go back into our stats database. We'll go to spells, select heal. We'll give it an icon, which will be the same as our health increase. We'll give it the school ID of abjuration. And then we just need to go to our canvas, manual spell selection, button. I turned it to be enabled instead of disabled. Let's also go to classes real quick. Select Magician, and we're going to unlock that immediately so that we don't have to wait multiple levels. All right, press play one last time. Pop in here. First of all, let's take... Well, actually, we've already seen what happens if we take a level in Rogue, so we'll take Magician right away. There we are. Mana regen. There's our heart, class level, Magician, mana regen again. All right, now we'll open the spell selection. Hit the close button, and there we go. So now we can hit 2, but we can also hit F3. All right, that is all for this tutorial. Join us next time when we will be covering events and tokens. Until then, thanks for joining, and I hope you have a good one.